Okay, so everybody welcome and thanks for joining us. So I'm very pleased to say that Colleen's agreed to do this session with me today all around consumer vulnerability, which will hopefully be really helpful to you guys in the utilities space. So she'll talk a little bit more around citizens advice and what they're doing at the moment with the changes with the pandemic. So if you've got any questions, pop them in the chat box on the right hand side. We'll either come to them as and when, and I'll let Colleen know that they're there while she's in the flow of her presentation if it's convenient, or we'll come back to them after the session. We'll sort of play it by ear and see how we go. But don't worry about any question that you think might be silly, or if there's anything that you're not sure about, just pop it in there and we'll go through it. It's not a problem at all. So yeah, over to you, Colleen.
Thank you. Can everyone see the screen okay? Should be fine. Great, thank you. So thanks so much for joining me today. I know it's 4 o'clock on a Wednesday afternoon. You've probably got 1,000,001 things that you could be doing. So I really appreciate you all coming along today, and thank you to Holly for organising this as well. So just a little bit about myself, just to get started. So my name's Colleen Pollard, and I work at Citizens Advice Plymouth, and I've been there for 14 years. I started there 14 years ago on a new debt project that was going at the time as a face-to-face debt advisor. Did that for 10 years and went on to manage one of our utility contracts, our EDF contract, for 2 years. And then most recently took on the role of head of utilities. And what that basically means is I now oversee the full utilities department. So that's EDF Energy, OVO, we've got Bulb, and we've got South West Water. And I make sure that we work consistently across those teams, you know, work within our contractual requirements, hit KPIs, and make sure that our quality standard through Citizens Advice is maintained. So as I was saying, we do work in partnership with some organisations already. So Citizens Advice Plymouth work in partnership with the ones on the screen here. So EDF, OVO Energy, Bulb, and South West Water. And what we do is we provide the support to their customers in 3 key areas. So we look at holistic debt advice, income maximisation, and energy efficiency. Also, as part of our service with Bulb and with OVO, we manage their support fund in-house. And this involves checking eligibility and collating the evidence that's needed. We also provide a service to EDF customers where we make applications to the support fund on their behalf, and we award grants and financial support to South West Water customers. So we are governed by the Financial Conduct Authority, and we have earned the Advice Quality Standard Mark. And for those of you who don't know necessarily what the Advice Quality Standard Mark is, it's a sector-owned, independently audited quality standard, which is awarded to organisations that demonstrate that they are easily accessible, effectively managed, and employ staff with the skills and knowledge to meet the needs of their client. So being in Plymouth has often been a barrier for us in the past, as many people will naturally assume that, you know, as we're in Plymouth, we only support our local area, which is quite standard with Citizens Advices across the country. However, Citizens Advice Plymouth is not your traditional Citizens Advice. We are the largest or the 3rd largest office in the country, and we focus on working in partnership with the utility industry to provide a national telephone and digital service. We currently have 80 full-time employees in our health centre in Plymouth at the moment. So although we are an independent charity, we are fortunate to have the advantage of being part of a larger network of over 400 offices in England, Scotland and Wales. So as I'm sure most of you will agree, 2020 has been quite unique so far. There's been lots of challenges that we would never have ever been able to predict before this year, or even expected would ever happen. So I don't think there's a single person out there that hasn't been affected in some way by the pandemic so far this year. So what I'm referring to in this slide is what I see as a new wave of vulnerability. So these are people who potentially have never been in debt. They've never had a problem with their income. They've never needed any advice or support before. They've never claimed benefits. This is a totally new period of their life that they would never have experienced in the past. So how do we look to engage these people? How do we support these people? How do we proactively go out there and reach out to these people to make sure that they get the support that they need? So I don't know what everyone's opinion about this is. It's probably quite a good talking point, really. But I think personally, the hardest times are still to come. I don't think what's happened so far has really shown the impact of what coronavirus is going to do. So we're moving now into the winter months. Many energy bills are going to become more expensive anyway. We're going to have a lot of people that are working from home, so using more energy. We're going to have people that are self-isolating for periods of time. And this is all going to increase the cost of their bills. On top of that, we've got the furlough scheme ending. The new job retention scheme will help some, but there will be probably a huge impact to the amount of unemployment that we're going to see throughout the country. There's also going to be a lot of people that have already received support. So they've already had payment holidays and deferments for different bills and mortgages and from creditors, but they might now find themselves in a more vulnerable position than what they were when they had that support initially. So how do we identify vulnerability? How do we identify if a customer can't pay or they won't pay? So the FCA guidance is, or the FCA, sorry, the vulnerability is someone who, due to the personal circumstances, is especially susceptible to detriment, particularly when a firm is not acting within appropriate levels of care. So I think it's true to say that anyone, especially now, could find themselves in a vulnerable circumstance at any time. So there was some research published recently by Citizens Advice in August 2020, and it states that 1 in 9 people, that's the equivalent of 6 million people across the UK, have actually reported falling behind on their household bills because of coronavirus. And I think that figure is absolutely staggering. They also state that there are fears that businesses, landlords and councils might also face the prospect of being saddled with a mountain of unrecoverable debt, and that this could affect their own viability moving forward. So, as I said, I appreciate it can be really difficult to identify the difference between somebody who can't pay and won't pay. And there is a saying that we hear sometimes at Citizens Advice, and that is you choose to eat or heat. And that really is the sad reality for some people. So when speaking to customers, it's extremely important that we ask them the right questions and we fully explore their situation. We need to listen for potential triggers and not make assumptions, let them explain what the circumstances are in their lives. Once that vulnerability has been identified, though, it's incredibly important that the right support is provided at that time to maintain those good relationships. So I understand with debt collection, it's not always possible to give that support to clients ongoing. And the focus is obviously on collecting those repayments. That's why it's so important to be able to find that expert support for the client to help them reach a solution. So if a person is struggling with debt with their energy supplier, it is really likely that they've got other debt as well. This is why a holistic approach to debt advice is so important. We need to review the whole situation from the income they've got coming in to the payments that they're making to other creditors. And often we find that people will be paying the creditor that shouts the loudest or puts the most pressure on them, not necessarily the one that's a priority and that they should be focusing on. So by dealing with the situation holistically, we are able to get that client or that customer in a more sustainable position moving forward, which will then give them the ability to effectively manage their finances, and that will result in an ongoing behaviour change and the ability for them to be able to pay their bills. So working in partnership with partnership work with Citizens Advice ensures that the customers get what they need. They get the support they need to work towards a resolution. So if a customer was referred to us, it would be because they've got a debt with one of our existing partners at the moment, and they're not able to make a repayment plan or pay the debt in full. So what happens then is we would call that customer and we would complete a full and detailed exploration with them. This would include details around their health, their family situation, information around their property so that we can do a full assessment for energy efficiency, their housing, employment, all the relevant information that we need to find out about their personal circumstances. And then we would do a full income and expenditure with them as well. The advice then would be prepared based on that personal information. So it would be specifically, tailored to their needs to make sure that the advice that they give is relevant and they are able to follow it. We would provide further support to assist them with contacting other creditors, and we would provide them with support to set up payment arrangements and, to look at making claims for benefits and anything else that they need. So, excuse me, just have a quick drink of my drink. So what we find is being able to, if we're able to deal with all aspects of that issue that they've got, and we're able to find a resolution for them, what happens then? They're getting the correct income, they're able to manage their budget, they're able to prioritise their expenditure, and we've given them energy efficiency to reduce their energy bills. We find that will give, that holistic approach will give them the opportunity to be able to manage that moving forward. What we do find sometimes is that people don't always cope well with advice over the telephone. And that's where the advantage of having our Citizens Advice Network comes in. If we do identify someone would benefit from face-to-face advice, then we will make a referral through our own network to one of their local offices who would be able to arrange an appointment to see them. So I'm sorry if anyone heard that bang then, that was my son just coming in the door. So Ofgem recently, in October 2019, Ofgem Consumer Vulnerability Strategy was published, and it recommended working in partnership to support vulnerable customers. It states that they wish to focus on 5 areas to drive strong improvements for consumers in vulnerable situations. So these 5 areas were improving identification of vulnerability and smart use data, supporting those struggling with their bills, driving significant improvements to customer service for vulnerable groups, encouraging positive and inclusive innovation, and the one that's really key to us is working with partners to tackle issues that cut across multiple sectors. So last year we had some really amazing results. So as you can see from the slides here, we identified £3.8 million worth of additional income for our clients. We wrote off £2 million worth of debt. There was £250,000 worth of charitable grants awarded, and £900,000 worth of paid payments rescheduled and made more affordable for our clients moving forward. I'm really, really proud of these results, and obviously the positive impact that we do have on people's lives. What's really interesting is this year, there's been a clear switch in the advice that we've been given due to coronavirus. I ran a report earlier, and in the first 6 months of the year, we've already identified £4.5 million worth of additional income for our clients. So as you can see, that's a huge switch. Debt's not been a huge issue. Debt's not really been a focus up till now because there's been so much on hold and so many payment holidays and deferments available. So I think my prediction would be that in the next sort of month or two, we're going to see a real switch in this again, where that debt becomes more prominent and people are going to need that support to how they're going to pay back the debt that they've accumulated over the last 6 months whilst it's been on hold. So some other great figures here. So just to show that sort of what holistic service can do. So with South West Water, 90% of their customers were able to maintain their ongoing payments and demonstrated a change of behaviour. 71% of OVO Energy customers maintain their payment arrangements after receiving support from us. 72% of Plymouth clients, 72% of Citizens Advice Plymouth clients received bespoke energy efficiency advice, which helped them to reduce their energy bills. And our utility teams completed over 12,500 advice appointments, supporting clients with 150,000 different issues. So this just shows that holistic advice really does make a difference, and it really does help people to improve their lives. I'm really pleased to also say that we're now getting recognised nationally. In 2019, we won the prestigious Charity Times Award for Best Partnership for the work that we are doing with EDF. And this year we were shortlisted for the work we do as a full utilities department. We've also been shortlisted for the Corporate Partnership of the Year Third Sector Award. Now, this isn't actually due to take place until the 8th of October, so we're really keeping our fingers crossed on this one. So thank you so much, everybody, for listening. Is there any questions at this point?
So I can't see. Sorry.
Just a very quick one, if I can. That's 4.5 million of additional benefits. This is CA Plymouth only, isn't it? Is that right?
It is. Yeah.
That's phenomenal.
Yeah,
and how many other branches are there? Like CA other towns?
There's over 400. So obviously I can't speak for every office because we are all independent. But if you think that's, I mean, we do work on a national service, so it's not just for people in Plymouth. But that figure for 6 months of the year it just really shows how difficult it's been for people since March. I mean, those figures are from the 1st of April till today. So yeah, it's quite a staggering figure. And you know, the other figure around, you know, was it 60 million people are experienced, or was it 6 million? Sorry, we're experiencing, you know, problems now with their household bills because of this. So I'm just going to unshare my screen for a second, if that's okay, so I can see. I don't know if you can see me or not.
I can.
I can't.
Just be nice to see you when I'm see who I'm talking to.
Can I just ask a question? It's Sue from Wessex Water. So hi Colleen, really interesting to hear you. Just in terms of capacity moving forward, I think we're all expecting there to be a, you know, we're not quite sure, are we, what's coming down the track. But I think, are you geared up, because we refer lots and lots of our customers to Citizens Advice and other debt advice providers. These are going to be customers who might not even have any debt yet or whatever. But are you prepared for that capacity? Because that's obviously a concern. How will you cope? Are you geared up with more staffing to sort of, or you know, is any funding coming through to help you? And I know you said you're mostly telephone. You can do a lot of telephone and digital, which I know is probably more efficient. But how are Cité geared up generally to cope with what will be an increasing demand on your services?
Thanks, Sue. I can't talk for Cité generally because we are an independent office. So the way that we work is solely for, you know, Citizens Advice Plymouth. So the way that we're set up, we do have our help centre, and we are looking to expand that all the time. We have just had a huge amount of growth. Actually, 2 weeks ago, we took on a further 25 advisors for our Bold project. We are in a position where we can recruit and we can get set up relatively quickly. At the moment, with people working from home, I've been really proud of the teams to be able to do that transition. Back in March, when we found out the office was closing, we moved our whole call centre, our whole, you know, service within 48 hours to home working, where the predominantly still people are working at the moment. It might be that you know, we are finding at the moment there's a lot of unemployment, and you know, being able to offer jobs to people in our local area is something that we're looking to do. But there might be the possibility of going further afield with home working moving forward. Having the capacity to do it wouldn't be an issue, as in when contracts were agreed and you know, looking to start, then we would look to recruit to fill those places.
I think it's probably important to highlight here as well, Colleen, there's two different ways of referrals to you guys, isn't there? There's the typical referral that would happen with somebody that was in some kind of financial hardship, which is a more of a generic, isn't it? Whereas there is also the option for building a partnership so that you have a dedicated team assigned to your customer base essentially then as well.
Yeah, that's right, Holly. So that's sort of how we work at the moment with our current partners, is we do have dedicated teams working with their customers. So they would have a dedicated referral system or helpline that their customers can reach us on. So, you know, they can self-refer as customers, or they can be referred by the provider for us to then contact them and do the assessments and work with them that way. We clearly can't offer a face-to-face service for everybody across the country, but you know, that's why we have the advantage of having the rest of the Citizens Advice network, because although we work independently, when it comes to referring people for further support, we are able to do that. Because we share the same systems, whatever work we do with them in Plymouth can then be passed on to a local office to continue with, if that's what's needed.
Colleen, just one from me. It's David.
Hi, David.
You talked about the charitable grants and write-offs and things like that. At what point do you decide that that's the route to go? What determines whether somebody gets a grant or you write off stuff?
So it depends on the contract itself. So each contract will have its own criteria. So what will happen is when the referrals come through to us, we will assess to see if it meets the criteria for that supplier. So for example, if it was Oval Energy, they will have their own criteria it needs to meet. So we will do an assessment based on that. They'll still get debt advice from us no matter what. We'll still support them no matter what. But at that point, we would be able to decide if they meet the criteria to have a grant from OVO to write off their debt. And it works in a similar situation with all of the providers. They have a criteria that we would assess those clients to see if they fit. With regards to charitable support that's outside of the provider, outside of the energy supplier, we do look at charities across the country that might be suitable. We will also look to, get items of white goods, carpets, beds. We've had buggies for people. There's numerous things that we will look to provide if we identify that there's a hardship there. But they would be from potentially independent charities across the country. But we've built up a really good database of information, and we know who we can apply to for what, and what they can support with, and then we would support the client with that application to the point of hopefully getting them that grant.
Okay, so for example, if you're going to write stuff off, does that depend on, we'll write off that bit as long as the customer, in this case, then goes on and maintains going forward?
Yeah, absolutely. So what would happen as part of the assessment, if they're eligible for the funds, then what they would need to do is set up a payment arrangement to cover their ongoing usage, and they need to make 3 payments before that payment would be made onto their account. So what we find is that's what encourages the behaviour change. If we just give the grant payment at that time, there's no guarantee that they would start to pay. But if we can get them paying and get them into the habit of paying, deal with the other issues that they might have in the background that's been a barrier to make it affordable for them, then once they get to the stage of making that 3rd payment and having the debt written off, that's where we get those stats around the ongoing sort of payment plans staying in place and that behaviour change. Okay,
that sounds really interesting. So I sort of been trying something like that and set criteria, which included, I wanted to help people who, part of it was you've established that you've been a good payer with us, something's happened, you now got an issue, and going forward, if you're going to start paying, we'll look to write off some of the debt or whatever.
Yeah.
The challenge has been twofold, really. One, identifying people that have been historically good payers. It seems they come on board and they stop paying pretty quickly. And 2, that they're in a position to resume sort of payment, or confident that they can resume payment, and therefore they're sort of stuck in a limbo and in the middle, really, that they don't feel ready to commit to pay going forward. So we don't want to be, one, really funding them forever, and 2, we're not confident that they were can't pay in the first place. So it's a difficult balance, I think, trying to find the right people to help.
It is difficult, and I think that's why a holistic service works so well, is because you're looking at all aspects of their life and what might be impacting them paying. So it might be that there's stuff that they haven't disclosed along the line that is actually impacting their ability to be able to pay, and if we can get them support that they need there, there's the income, as you can see, that we've identified is huge. There's people out there who aren't claiming the benefits that they're potentially entitled to, and that will have a knock-on effect then with them not being able to pay their debts. It's really, really common for people to pay their Barclay card other than their gas or electric bill, because Barclay card will ring them 10 times a day and pressure them in. I'm not just naming Barclay card. I mean, generally what I mean, but they will put them under so much pressure to pay that I think, that they pay the people that shout the loudest, which isn't necessarily the right thing to do. But until we have those conversations and discuss it, they don't necessarily know that's not the right thing to do. So it's about changing that behaviour. Looking at budgets, budgeting is a big thing. Sometimes people are just putting their money in the wrong places, and they just need a bit of guidance on how to sort of work that out in a more reasonable way moving forward, so they can pay their debts.
Yeah. Okay.
We do look at insolvency as well. Sometimes there is just no other way. Somebody just needs to draw a line and start afresh. So we would look at insolvency as well.
Yeah. I don't know if you've seen, Colleen, as well. There's a couple of questions from Tracy. She said that she's got the builders in, so
no, I've seen them.
So the first one was whether CAB were still offering face-to-face meetings at the moment, given everything that's sort of going on. So how's that working?
Well, again, I can't talk for the rest of the offices in the country, but from what I'm aware, some are managing to do so, and some aren't, depending on how big the offices are and how many staff that they've got available. For ourselves in Plymouth, we are open, but only with skeleton staff, and only people that have to work in the office because they can't work at home, or it's affecting their mental health, or they've not got space. And we are running a reduced face-to-face service for those people that just can't engage in any other way. So on an appointment only basis, we're not running a drop-in service at the moment, but we are able to see people that really need that support. But it is a limited service, unfortunately, at the moment.
Right, okay. And then the other question was asking around how the partnership with South West Water operates. I'm not 100% sure what you mean though, Tracy, sorry.
I mean, I can give you a rough sort of breakdown of what we do, if that will help.
Thank you.
Yeah, so the South West Water contract is made of several different parts at the moment. So we look to award Fresh Start grants for people who qualify, and we look to put them on, look at tariffs like the water care tariff, to make sure that if they're on certain means tested benefits, they're on a low income, that they get the reduced tariffs. So we'll do those assessments to see if they qualify, and we will set that up with South West Water. The other part of the service with South West Water, again, is the income max. So, you know, we would identify if somebody was missing out on any income that they could be claiming. And we do also do some appointments for them as well. We do have a generalist advisor that can support South West Water clients with any sort of issues that they have that's impacted them at all.
Brilliant. Thank you. I think Tracy got the answers. Yeah, bro.
Thank you.
I'd be interested to know, Colleen, you talked about people impacted by COVID, and what sort of groups of people? Because there's a lot of people obviously still in work that were able to, and then there's a furlough scheme, etc. So what are the types of customers that are then come for help that you probably wouldn't have seen? What kind of circumstances did they find themselves in?
So it's actually quite interesting, because I pulled this report earlier to get the benefit figure, and I was quite surprised. I think historically I would say that, you know, we've probably had more people who have got sort of disabilities, longer term health conditions that contact us, you know, as a rule. And when I pulled the report today for this year, 33% of those people that had contacted us were disabled or had a long-term health condition, and 62%, I don't know where the other few percent went, but 62% were not disabled with no health conditions. So I think I haven't got it in front of me, but if I was to compare that to a report from a previous year, again, I think that's a total switch in the type of people, the type of clients that we're dealing with. So it's quite interesting that you asked that, because I noticed that myself earlier on when I was looking at it. It would predominantly be people who were out of work, but it's changed. It's gone the other way this year.
Yeah. So I mean, what it was kind of more interesting that, because I've worked with for Empower, so we get obviously customers across the whole of the country, and you know, we've seen some impact clearly from COVID of customers with additional time to pay, etc. It's obviously with our segmentation, we're not really able to say what the circumstances that triggered that, because, you know, how I talked about is, well, anybody on benefits is still on benefits. Anybody that was working is working, and either that or they're furloughed. There has been a lot of people, you know, that have lost jobs as companies have closed, but they're not all going to be homeowners, etc. So we're having a discussion about, well, what is it, the groups of customers that, you know, because they may not reach out to us. No. Trying to identify who it is who's then, you know, vulnerable, because lots of people are still being paid. Therefore, other than the part you mentioned, you know, I think we've seen a general 5% increase on consumption in energy across the piece, because more people are at home and using more. So, and that was in the summer months. So potentially, as you go into winter, that's going to be significantly more. Yeah, but we couldn't really nail, well, what is that group of, you know, the entertainment industry, maybe self-employed, and I don't know.
I'm not sure we've really seen it yet, Rob. I think that's what's to come, to be honest. I think, you know, people potentially have been not comfortable, but okay on the furlough scheme, and they've been managing relatively well on, you know, 80% or 70% of their wages. But I think as that continues to drop, that's when we're really going to start to see the impact. And you know, I don't think it won't necessarily be those low income families. It'll be those families that were used to having a really good income that potentially will be hit the most from this. So people who have lost businesses, their own sort of self-employed businesses haven't been able to continue, and people who, you see it on LinkedIn quite a lot. There's a lot of people job seeking that were in quite high positions, quite high up positions, that have lost their jobs. So I think, it's almost like a totally different situation to what we could have predicted ever happening. It's almost like the people, like you say, on benefits haven't really been affected. Their benefits haven't changed. In fact, in some cases they've been given more money, haven't they? So I think this is what I mean. This is what I mean by a new wave of vulnerability. There's people out there who, they won't know about this sort of thing. They won't know what to do if they're in debt. They will have never experienced claiming a benefit in their life, but they've just lost their business through no fault of their own. And it's how do we sort of make them aware that there is support available for them as well. And I think that the job retention scheme will continue, won't it? I think is it till April next year, but on a lot less money, and not potentially won't potentially benefit people who have been self-employed. So I think we really are waiting to see what the impact's going to be. And I think once the furlough finishes and we get closer to Christmas, that's when we're really going to start to see the change in maybe payment behaviour.
I think you make a really good point though, Rob, because I think we're at Wessex, we've got a whole raft of affordability schemes, but traditionally they've been designed around customers who would, have maybe longer term issues, lower income type customers, whereas these are going to be a completely different set of customers with a different sort of, so we're looking at introducing more temporary schemes to get them back on track and this kind of thing to add to our armoury, because they are, as you say, and so, and really sort of do we put them through full holistic advice because they might not have any debt, they might just need something a bit more shorter term, and so there's a whole raft of things that we're grappling with, and then which ones we do and don't refer to our debt advice partners. And I guess you'll have to look at your procedures, Colleen, to see whether you treat those. There's a slightly different process for some of these customers, as you say, higher income, higher discretionary expenditure, maybe are sort of they're still coping, they haven't built up masses of debt, but how do you then navigate them through the system alongside what I would call your BAU clients, who generally are the more traditional ones that we would put on many of our schemes. It's a big conundrum for us, I think, at the moment, we're trying to grapple with by the 1st of November.
And for us, the advice that we provide would be available to all, regardless of their circumstances or their income. That wouldn't really play a part in it, because it's sort of relative, isn't it? If you've got more money coming in but your outgoings are much higher, it's about the money that they've really got left over. It's about that disposable income that they've got available. So it can depend where they live, and what the outgoing costs are for where they live compared to some other areas. Sometimes people who work aren't always better off than people on benefits. That's the reality of it as well. But people on benefits to pay, isn't it? The support. So for us, it's really about looking at each case individually, and that income and expenditure, that budgeting advice, and looking at that is what's really, really important. Because there might be things that they're paying for that they could cut back on, or there may not be, but without going through and doing that full assessment, it's very difficult to know what their full situation actually is.
It's just coping, I think, with the volumes, isn't it? If we normally have X number go through our process, if we've got 10 times that, we're going to completely bombard Cité, and you'll collapse with the demand. So we've got to try and, I guess, come up with something that balances that, really. So and
it's about the assessment you make, isn't it, to whether or not
Absolutely.
It's that you can deal with at your end and you're happy to support at your end, or whether you think they might need that further support, and go through to somebody else.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we've had Amanda from South Staffs in Cambridge Water, who's made a couple of comments, just that I think are very on point for what we've just talked about. So initially she mentioned that they're seeing their customers getting quite frustrated without the face-to-face support in their area from Citizens Advice, which obviously is a completely separate entity to yourselves. They're West Midlands based, and they look after the Cambridge area as well, because they've got a community hub that's open face to face, and they're coming. I think you mean, Amanda, that they're coming to you guys directly for additional help and support that would normally go through Citizens Advice, such as filling in sort of housing forms and benefit advice and things like that.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're coming to us with all sorts of random queries. And I think the problem is, in the past, we've had Citizens Advice do actual surgeries at our community hub. So they see us as like kind of like a bit of a one-stop shop for all sorts of different advice. And now that the Citizens Advice are not doing that face-to-face support, it's very difficult for them to get help anywhere else, because the libraries are shut, the council offices are shut, Citizens Advice, it's all telephone-based sort of activity with regards to the customers, and they're just getting extremely frustrated with it. So they're asking us to complete housing forms and application for benefits, and what benefits should I be on, and when you say you'll need to contact Citizens Advice because we'll need to, or we can refer you, it's a case of, well, don't bother, because I've tried contacting them and it's all telephone based and I can't deal with that. So you've got a lot of different vulnerabilities here, and there's a massive spectrum from people that can deal with telephone referrals, as well as the digital virtual aid, to people that can't even work a phone. So any of the virtual sort of sessions that Citizens Advice have set up, from the digital coaching aspect in relation to universal credit, accessing their own universal credit journals, they just can't do, because they just need that helping hand and that hand holding, which just isn't there at the moment. So it's quite difficult for people, and we're seeing that a lot, an awful lot at the moment coming into the hub.
Yeah, and it's I appreciate your frustrations there. I mean, I would go back to the office in a heartbeat and open it up, but unfortunately we are governed by, we are governed by the government, and we have to do what we're told. But it is really unfortunate, and of course it is difficult for people who struggle with technology. I mean, we do try and be as accessible as we possibly can with regards to phone, web chat, messaging. We're looking at doing WhatsApp. There's the potential for us to do sort of, I don't know, maybe Zoom, Skype type calls. But currently at the moment, we are really limited. Having said that, for us in Plymouth, our service has always been telephone based because we're national. So although there is a core service in Plymouth that deal with local Plymouth, with the local Plymouth area, the utilities department has always provided a national service, and we've been doing this for 11 years and found it really, really successful. And there isn't anything that we can't do over the telephone or online that you would be able to do face to face, if we can get those clients to engage with us. And I think we are very good at getting that engagement, and going through the exploration and finding out exactly what they do need, sharing information with getting them to share information with us that we can then support them to complete forms, etc. So we are able to do that, but I absolutely take your point. It's very frustrating that the offices aren't open at the moment, and they're coming to you for stuff that's not necessarily within your remit of things that you can do. I'm not sure what's happening in your area or how long that's going to be the case for. But
yeah, they are. I think they are going to start to do very limited face-to-face. They do have sort of like a community vehicle that's out on the road at the moment, so we are linking them. I mean, we do have a really good relationship with our Citizens Advice. We're very lucky. So we do have those sort of first name terms. We can refer customers to them. So they'll come and join it on events. So we do have an excellent relationship with our Citizens Advice. But I just think that perhaps because we potentially had that too good a relationship with Citizens Advice, that they see us as an extension of that.
Yeah, no, that's probably the case. They, the public coming in probably see you as the same sort of, entity, don't they? Which is,
I think they do, yeah.
And then you also mentioned as well, didn't you, Amanda, about sort of quickly changing tariffs and introductions of a COVID tariff, which Tracy's mentioned Welsh Water are doing as well at the moment, to sort of help with the extension of furlough and things as a temporary tariff. So I think that's something that's happening quite a bit at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah, we started doing ours back in March, ready for sort of lockdown, really. We were quite quick getting it in, and I think that's the thing, because we do our eligibility checks in-house. We're able to adapt quite quickly, and I just wondered if you had any problems changing and adapting quite quickly and training your staff. I mean, one of the things, again, we found is trying to sort of get that information out to the Citizen Advice. Sometimes it's waiting for their team meetings, and obviously with the virtual stuff that's going on at the moment, it's been quite difficult for us to sort of like really reinforce the message that we do have these schemes out there. We've got an Assure Assist tariff, which is for people on universal credit applicants, where they can get free water for 8 weeks. So we're just really trying to get that information out there, and whether or not it's just bombarded of information from various sources and just not being able to take all the offer of support on board very quickly. I don't know, but I'm just wondering if you have that ability to adapt very quickly to the change that's happening within. Obviously you're dealing with a lot of partners because you're dealing with the tariffs for them. Do you have that problem of getting the information trained out quite quickly? Do you have sort of an SLA as to how long you need to train that information out? Just quite interesting really from our point of view. Then we can sort of like build in some assumptions then if we're dealing with citizens advice, just how long we ought to probably give them just before we start saying we do have this tariff, can you start training it out now, and we should start seeing some sort of results from it.
Yeah, I mean, well, with ourselves, you know, as and when changes are made, you know, we would relay that down to the people that are doing the calls. So, you know, as and when we get information from the suppliers, we'd share that information straight away. So there wouldn't necessarily be any delay or you know, training needs to do that, because the appointment process themselves would still take the same format. When we're looking at the advice and tailoring it to the client, we would be then looking at all relevant tariffs, all relevant changes that have been made by that supplier or any others. As part of the appointment, when the advice is prepared, it is a case, especially at the moment and since COVID started, that, you know, the advisor needs to go on the websites of the local councils, of the water board, and they need to look at the supplier of the gas and electricity, and also look at people who supply, you know, personal debt as well, like loans, credit cards, that sort of thing, to see what the actual what they are actually saying on their websites for these individual companies, because the advice needs to be current. So what we might have said to them last year about what their options are, as you've rightly said then, are changing constantly with the way that the climate's changing. So as part of that advice process would be making sure that they were given that correct advice on the day. So checking the website, making sure that advice is current to that time. So I don't foresee any problems with that at all. I mean, and with regards to sort of getting set up and being organised, you know, we literally did that within 48 hours. And what we've done in the last, well, since April, is we've had quite a lot of recruitment. Our most recent recruitment being a couple of weeks ago, where we've taken on 25 new advisors to meet the demand. They're all being trained online, they're all being trained virtually. We've had really good feedback from the advisors that we've taken on already, and we've had advisors that we've taken on other contracts prior to this that have now at the point where they are dealing with clients on a daily basis, and we found it really successful. So if you had asked me a year ago, was it possible, I would have said no, but it absolutely is. You know, we're doing it on a daily basis, and I've got to be honest with you, we're busier than we've ever been. So I just think it's just going to be like this for, I don't know how long this is going to last, but I think it's going to be like this for some time, and we just need to go with that demand and adapt our service wherever we need to make sure that we're meeting it correctly.
Yeah, I fully accept that, and I think we should all be applauded for how quickly we've managed to adapt to change. And it had all of a sudden been a very virtual existence, whereas before, like you said, it wasn't even there really. So I think we've all done you know, I think we should all be patted on the back, and I think particularly and the way our staff have adapted to the change and changing culture. So yeah, so thanks for that.
Thank you.
So another question from Tracy around the best way of linking in with CAB, because of Tracy being in Wales, she doesn't know whether that might be something that's becoming a slight stickler, but I don't know if that makes any difference with you guys.
Nothing against Wales at all. No, no, that's no problem at all. I mean, if with regards to sort of having a look to see what sort of work we could basically do together, we could definitely speak about that at some point. But being in Wales is not a barrier for us, because we are providing that national service, so it's fine. There's no issues with that.
And then a question from Connor asking, is there a demographic in terms of age groups that you've seen recent changes to vulnerable groups that you've identified or referred to in your sort of presentation earlier? Because that's something that's changed quite a lot over the time we've been speaking since March, really, hasn't it, for you guys?
I'm just wondering, I have printed out a report, but I didn't actually specifically put that on there, so I'm just going to have a look at what our sort of top age band is on there. I haven't compared it to last year, so I'm not sure, but the most people that we're speaking to at the moment, our highest numbers are currently at the 35 to 39 year olds, closely followed by 30 to 34, And then third place, I would say 50 to 54-year-olds. So
quite interesting though, isn't it?
yeah,
That's probably the more established
long-term
people
work
within their career. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, definitely. I mean, if I was to have a report based on this time last year, would it be different? I don't know. I would say probably it would be.
Well, interestingly,
yeah,
Amanda
I can certainly have a look at that and see if I can get those figures.
Interestingly, Amanda's just said they've had some stats through saying that over 50s being made redundant has been at highest since records began.
Yeah.
And that's a DWP record for the West Midlands. So
these are people that are in well-established careers, aren't they? And you know, this is what I mean. They never expected this to happen to them in their lifetime. I wouldn't have thought. So yeah, this is how it's changing and how it's affecting different people.
So I don't know if anybody else has got any more questions at all, or we've bombarded you a little there, haven't we, Colleen?
That's absolutely fine.
I think it's just important to note as well, if anyone does have any sort of questions, you guys are open to having conversations about how you can help in as many ways as possible, aren't you?
Yeah, of course. And, you know, I'll share this presentation with you, Holly, and please share it with anybody that would like a copy as well. And I'll have my contact details on it. You know, if anybody would like to sort of have a chat offline around what we can do specifically, then that would be great. And we're happy to talk things through at any time. So just contact me and let me know.
Yeah, I think the important thing is it's forever changing, isn't it? And nobody's dealt with a global pandemic before. It's been a theme of topic of conversation for the fortnightly calls that we've been doing, and there's obviously a lot of questions that people have around it. We're dealing with something that we never imagined we'd have to this year, and I think everyone's doing a brilliant job. When you look at everyone having migrated to pretty much complete home working, we've been talking to people in contact centres up and down the country, overseas, that have done some amazing stuff during this time that we should all be proud of. It'd normally be award-winning and pioneering, wouldn't it? But everyone's had to do it. So I just think it's important for everyone to come together and just have a conversation about it, because I think it can sometimes feel like you're battling it alone as well, can't it, when you're sort of coming up against these problems internally. So I really appreciate your sort of thoughts and input as well. Thank you, Colleen.
Thank you. Thanks very much. And thanks so much for your time today, everybody. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, but if nobody else has got any more questions, then we'll leave it there for now. Thank you. But thanks again for attending, everybody, and I'll get the slides out to everybody too.
Thanks, everyone.
Nice
to
see
see
you.
you all.
Thanks, really interesting. Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.